this is Sam, the Frugal Hugel gardener. I'm out here first thing in the morning after prepping some of my worm bins, and I'm going to do a garden tour over here just to show you what happened to my banana plants. Now this is an ice cream banana. I harvested this rack like the day before we were going to have the hard freeze. I ripened them inside, although they started to ripe, they were yellowing. They're in my refrigerator now, and they're going into the freezer if they make it. Delicious. Once you harvest a rack of bananas that's starting to ripen, you bring them inside, you lay them on cardboard, you put some towels over it so the gases turn all of them yellow evenly. When you don't use towels over the top, or if you hang them up, they all ripen at different stages and different times. They never uniformly turn yellow. Once they ripen, put them in the refrigerator with the peels on. You could eat them for about 2 weeks in the refrigerator, at which time, then if they make it past 2 weeks, you could go ahead and peel them and put them in your freezer for your shakes and muffins and pancakes and stuff like that. So with that said, let me just take a second and enjoy this. This is going in my garden bed. All my scraps are going into my raised beds and into the worm bins, but you can only put so much in a worm bin or you'll be overfeeding it. So hey, let's go check out my brown banana plants. Okay, so I'm going to go around and show you that all my banana plants turned brown. I'm going to leave the leaves on the plant. That way they drape down and act as a blanket when we get the next frost. We're in December. We're not out of the woods until the beginning of April. And I'm going to show you what all my plants look like. And here we go. So an overview, you can see all the plants got hit. They're all brown. But if you look, the most important part right here, they're all nice and alive. So they're looking really good. So that's the main part. If you start seeing these turn yellow or brown, then it's dying, but they're all doing pretty good. At least the large ones are. So let's go check out some others. Okay, in my last video, I went ahead and told you about the banana racks on there. Let me do it again. This is an ice cream banana rack, and you can see that the shoot, the stalk that is holding the rack up, you can see it's getting dark, and you can see the bananas are starting to get dark. Now you could whack down that rack right now and use it to chop and drop, or bring it inside to your worm or compost or whatever you want to do with it. Me, I'm leaving them on there for a little bit because I don't want to go ahead and cut down that banana plant. I'm going to leave the banana plant up for a little bit. We were down in the lower 30s. Now we're getting back into the 80s. You might get away with cutting it down and chopping and dropping it, depending on if there's another cold spell coming quickly or not. But if the base of it that you cut down to the ground, if we get a cold spill and it didn't have a chance to heal itself, you got to pile a lot of stuff on it, because if that gets cold, it'll go through to the corm and kill the whole corm, and you're not going to be getting any suckers coming up, and then that's the end of your banana plant. So I hope I explained that properly. I feel it's best to leave it and leave the trunk alone, leave the whole plant intact versus cutting it down. But if you feel you want to cut your banana rack down, go ahead and do it. I may do it to a couple so I could feed my worms and just compost it. You could go ahead and freeze. You could cut that down, feed your worms, go ahead and freeze it, and when it's time to feed your worms again, you could thaw it out and put it in the worm bin, so you'll have a good supply of baby bananas that you could be feeding your worms with. I may do that with a couple of them, but I think I'm going to do it with some larger bananas versus the smaller ones, so there's a lot more in there for the worms to eat. So let's get going. Okay, so you can see right here, they're all brown. They still got some green to it, but they're all brown. So let's go ahead and turn. And let's go down here. You can see these are all brown. Okay, so right over here, these bananas are still looking good. The stalk is still green. So if the stalk is green and these are still green and they're plump, it's still feeding the bananas. So I'm going to leave that and watch it to see if it ripens or not. Now here's a stalk that I cut off just before the freeze. You can see that stalk is dying, but I left the plant intact and the plant is still green. So I'm going to leave this. Now if that plant starts turning yellow and brown, I'll go ahead and cut it down, and then chop and drop it over where I cut it. Here's a lot of other small banana plants. That's not going to make it. And you can see the stalk. You see that stalk? That stalk is turning dark. That means when the stalk starts turning black and the bananas start turning a different color, that's it. They're dead. You could cut it down. You could take that rack down, or you could chop and drop it to the ground and chance a cold spell, or just take off the fruit. For right now, until that stalk gets darker, I'm going to leave it. I just feel it's best until I see if we're going to have another cold spell coming up next week or not. If it's going to stay in the upper 80s for about 2 or 3 weeks, I'll chop and drop that whole plant. Okay, let's walk around. So you can see all the banana plants are turning, but all the trunks are looking really good and green. That's a sign of a healthy plant. Getting right back in here. This is looking good. That's looking good. We'll go through over here. This is looking good. This rack right here is turning a little bit, but it's looking okay. These are yellowing a little bit. I may be able to harvest that pretty soon. But I'm going to keep my eye on this. For right now, that's nice and green. The stalk is okay, and they're starting to yellow, so I'll keep my eye on it. Right here, this is looking okay. These are looking okay. I'm going to leave them. Okay, so right over here you can see all the big leaves. They went ahead and they're browning. But the physical banana plants are looking good. Now these right here, these suckers are not looking good. They may not survive. You can see the ones down in here that were protected are looking okay. Now we have a really nice banana rack over here, and this stalk is really green. You see that? The stalk is nice and green. Well, if that stalk stays green, this is still getting nutrients, so you can leave that on the plant. Now right over here we got some small young bananas. They're turning brown, so they're dead, and the stalk is starting to turn color. So you're going to want to go ahead. You don't have to do it right away, but eventually you're going to have to cut that down and then chop and drop the banana plant. But wait until you know there's not going to be another cold spell. Way on up here, you can see those young bananas. They're dead. You can go ahead and chop and drop that if you like. Take the stalk down. But the plant that it's on is looking nice and green, so I would leave it and wait till you see if we're out of the woods. Okay, so right over here, this is my praying hands rack. It's looking pretty good all the way up, all the way down. I'm keeping my eye on it. Everything's still hard. I could go ahead and harvest those and ripen them, but since the plant is looking really good, really thick, really green, I'm going to go ahead and leave that for a while. Just keep my eye on it. Okay, right over here, this banana rack is young, and the stalk is starting to turn color. So same thing with that. This could be chopped down, but the banana plant is looking nice and green, so I would leave it for a while. It's not going to live, but there's no reason to cut it down, because you don't want to promote growth and have some of your other banana plants shoot out a bud right now, because they'll die as soon as we have a freeze. Okay, now these right here, you see some of the bananas are not looking good, and the stalk is turning color. This one would be a good one for me to cut down for my worms, or to try to ripen them inside to make shakes out of, because I can see some of the bananas are going bad. Okay, right up over here, this is young. You can see that the bananas are not good. So these are not going to be good. You could cut it down. The stalk is looking good, and the plant is looking good. So I'm going to leave that plant. I'm not going to chop and drop it, because I don't want to promote growth. I don't want to promote other buds to come out of the other plants until spring. So why promote growth if spring is a long ways away? Well, you can tell this one here is shot. See how dark all that is? You could cut that off right now, but the rest of the plant is looking nice and green. So I would leave it up so it does not promote growth. When you cut that down, the corm will tell some of the other plants to shoot out a bud to continue its lifespan. So I wouldn't do it. Okay, so this plant right here, this is no good. You see the top's wilted off and it's turning color, and it's a little soft there. That could be chopped down, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it up for a while just because I don't want to promote growth. There's no hurry to chop it down. This one right here is looking good all the way on up. The plant is looking nice and green. Although some of the bananas look like they're changing, but it's still too young. But I could cut some of that down for my worms and freeze them. Okay, right up over here, we got a really nice rack. Everything looks good on the plant. I'm going to leave this one up for a while. Got another one hidden down in here. That's looking good all the way on up. I'm going to leave that in there for a while. No, I'm not in a hurry to cut that down. Right over here is a nice large one. Everything's still looking good. The stalk is turning a little dark. So more than likely I'm going to have to harvest this one here in about a week or two. But even if I do harvest it to ripen them in the house, because these are plump enough, I'm going to go ahead and leave this plant. As long as it stays green like this, I'm going to leave it up, because I don't want to promote another one shooting out a bud like this one over here. That one shot out a bud. The stalk is turning and all the babies are no good, so that's no good. But this plant is still looking good. So as long as it's not getting soft, I'm going to go ahead and leave it up for a while. Okay, right over here we got a nice rack. It's looking pretty good. It's almost ready to harvest. The plant is looking good. So I'm going to leave that up there. You could bring this size, you could bring in the house here and ripen it up, or use it for your worms or compost, but I'm going to leave it for a while. Right up over here we got a bud, and we have some small baby bananas. You can see those are not going to survive. Right over here we got some nice bananas. They're looking good. I'm going to go ahead and leave these up. The stalk's looking good. The plant's looking good. So as long as the stalk and the plant looks good, we're in December. We got January, February, and March. And in March we normally have a frost. If I can leave that plant up and keep it intact, even if I cut off the rack of bananas, I'm going to leave it there. I'll just put a ribbon around so I know to chop it down come April and chop and drop it. The moment you cut it down, the corm could rot. The corm could go ahead and freeze. I would rather that it rotted as a full plant than cut it down at this time. But with that said, it's still green, it's looking healthy. It's taking energy away from the other plants, so they're not going to shoot out a bud and start reproducing. So I feel that by leaving it, you're not promoting growth. Let's go down this way. Okay, so right over here we have some blue javas. They got frozen all the way down, but I protected the corm with all this mulch. And you can see right over here, and right over here, you got new growth coming out. Well, that's good. It's telling me the blue java's alive. However, we're going to have another cold spell, and this new growth is going to die. But it survived because look how high. There's about 1.5 feet of mulch all the way on up the rhizome, almost covering this one up right there. That's why it survived. Same thing over here, new growth coming in. This one over here does not have new growth, but it's green down there, but it's getting soft, so it may not survive. This one has some growth. It feels a little better. They're not out of the woods. Right over here, some new growth. So it's still alive down there. It feels okay. And these are kind of looking okay. These are ice cream bananas. They're looking okay. Right down in there, look at that. That new sucker started shooting out. So they're showing signs of life. So just leave them alone. We're probably going to have another freeze or two, so it'll kill what's coming out. But as long as that root ball, which is called the corm, stays warm and protected, it'll come back in the spring. Only time will tell. Okay, so right over here, my blue javas are really brown. You can see what happened to all the bananas. They're not looking good. But I have so much chips on this piled up that there's a good chance that all the corms are alive and they'll come out in the spring. See how badly they shriveled up? So you could definitely cut that down right now, but why do it? The plant is alive, the corms are alive. There's another small corm down there, it's looking green. So that outer plant on this side and that side are protecting what's in the middle of all that. Now look at all these, look at the color. Well, if I go down in here, you can see that the new suckers are looking good. But you can see that the actual fruit is not. But I'm going to leave that plant in because it looks like it's protecting. See, if I go down in here, it's protecting the other corms. So why cut it down if it's protecting all the other ones by being there? Same thing here. I'm not going to cut that down. Hopefully that protects all the others. Plus I have all that piled up. Same thing over here. Same thing over here. Even though everything's brown, you got some corms down there, some new suckers coming out, they're protected. These blue javas are on their way out. The stalk is starting to die. You see right there, it's starting to die, so that has to be cut off eventually. Okay, so these banana plants got hit good. You can see they're not doing well. Now this banana plant right here, it had a bud on it. It's dying. The plant is getting soft. So this here, see the color on it? This could be cut down. But for right now, I'm just going to leave it. In nature, that would just stay in, die, and fall over. I want to protect that corm. I will go ahead and chop and drop it if the weather is going to stay nice. Same thing over here. You can see all these are dying right here. And the stalk is browning. Stalk is getting soft. So this is dead. But the plant is looking good. So you could cut that off right now. Just so long as it... If you're still cold where you are, don't do nothing to it. These bananas are dying. The stalk is browning. Leave it up there if the weather's still cold. Same thing over here. You see how dark that is? This is starting to get soft, getting dark. This is dying or dead. But the actual banana plant is looking okay. Same thing over here. This is dying, so it's dead. You could cut it if the weather's good. If it's not good, don't cut it. Okay, so the reason why I'm showing you all this, because I had a lot of people online email me and post down below the videos. They want to know what to do with the banana plants and the fruit that's on them. So basically, you can see I'm in short sleeve right now. I was down in the lower 30s. Now it's in the 80s. It's going to be in the 80s for the next week, but it may take another dive, so I'm going to leave it. But you can cut off the bananas right now, and I may cut down a couple of them that are good, and then freeze the whole rack. You know, cut the bananas off and freeze them. And then at a later date, I'll thaw them out and feed them to my worms. Okay, so the reason why I'm showing you this, let's recap. I just want to show you that if you're in Florida and it's getting warm, don't take it for granted that we're not going to have another freeze. So you got to do what you feel is best, but remember, the plant, its main purpose is to survive. So if you chop down the fruit, and if you go ahead and chop down the base all the way down and chop and drop it, the plant is going to say, oh, it's time for me to go ahead and sprout out another bud, and that bud will die in the freeze. But what I'm really concerned about is the corm down below. If you cut it, then that could freeze and kill the corm below it to the surrounding ones, and you won't get any pups. Because normally when you chop and drop a banana plant after you harvest the rack, down below on that corm, there's other suckers that are ready to come out. So if the corm dies, you lose all those. So with that said, you could harvest some of your bananas that are dying if you have a purpose for them, like freeze them and go ahead and use them for your worm bed or compost them or something like that. But do not cut the plant down until you know we're out of the woods. So hey, with that said, this is Sam, the Frugal Hugel Gardener. Give me a like, give me a share. Come on over to my Facebook page. Come on over to my Facebook group. We would love to have you. And right over here, you can see all my squash. The frost got to them all. But you can see that there's a lot on the ground. Okay, so you can see I have some Seminole pumpkins on the ground. They're a ripe color, but all the vines died because of the freeze. So what to do with these? Well, I'm going to go ahead and come out here and get them all and utilize them for my worm bed. But there's way too many of them to feed to my worms at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and take some and I'm going to freeze them. I'll slice them up and freeze them in gallon baggies. And when it comes time to feed the worms, I could thaw it out and put it in the worm bed.